Welcome, everyone, and you are listening to The Last Dinosaur, and I'm your host, Chris Aversano. On today's pod, we will have Holly Birkett, reporter at Tradewinds, and I'm so excited to have her on the show. Holly's noted for her coverage of the dry bulk sector, but also covers the UK legal beat, a bit of finance stuff here and there, and anything else that catches her eye. For those of you that have not read her stuff, it's great and worth a Tradewinds subscription. Holly, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the kind words. Nice to be here.
This is great. You know, I'm really excited to have you on the program, on the pod. So let's just jump right in. About the first question I usually ask everybody is, how'd you get interested in shipping?
Oh God. Well, I always tell people that I was tricked. I was tricked into it because I always wanted to be a music journalist or a knitwear designer or just something stupid like that. Yes, I tricked into it. That's kind of true, I guess. I graduated in 2008 from university, and I did English literature. It's not very helpful, not very vocational. With the state of, obviously, 2008 was a terrible time to graduate because just, you know, a few months later, Lehman collapsed and just the jobs market was absolutely diabolical. So then I became a waitress, just under a year. The most fun job I've ever had, but it's not what I wanted to do. And then I went backpacking, and then I came back, and I was unemployed. And anyway, getting to the point now, I got it. I did get a job in the end, but I got it by default because the girl who did get the job, she walked out on the second day at lunchtime, never came back, and they called me up and they said, "Oh, you interviewed for this job before Christmas. Do you still want it?" And I said, "Yeah, all right." So I did it, and I got there on the first day. I'd actually found that job on the UK equivalent of Craigslist, which probably should have been a red flag. The job had been advertised as junior editor, but on the first day, I found out that no, I was the editor. They were going to be paying me a graduate's wage. So very quickly, I had to learn how to run a magazine from top to bottom, as well as the subject matter, which was ports and shipping. Got obsessed with it, and I to the point where I would go to house parties and friends of friends would come up to me and go, "Oh, I know you. You're the ports girl." Yeah, I just and to this day it's exactly the same. I'm still fascinated by maritime industry across the board, particularly shipping, but about how world trade moves, and I just feel like it gives you so much more of an informed point of view, where our goods come from, how countries interact with each other, everything really, our food needs, our energy needs. So I've stuck around for 12 years now, and my dream job was always to go and work for Tradewinds. So here I am, finally did it. I actually grew up on a farm. All of my family are dairy farmers. The farms in the north of England and just outside a very small town. And I always, growing up, was just desperate to get out of there and just go somewhere more exciting and travel. And then I think that's part of the attraction of working in shipping, is that now I traveled, well, pre-COVID, and hopefully from now on, traveled a lot, have a network that goes all over the world. You know, I can be in any major maritime city and know people there and meet up and go for a drink. And yeah, friends from all over. I'm
It
very
is
happy.
an exciting type of business, and it's not the same thing for me, but certainly, like, I have nobody in my family that is in the maritime business. We see a lot of that in this industry, and it's just a matter of, I went to a future student day at the high school I went to, and there was this college that I ended up going to, New York Maritime, and I was like, this is what I want to do. It was, you know, no other reason than international trade on a ship, travel a bunch, which I enjoyed doing. And same with you a little bit. Haven't done it really too much in the last 2.5 years. And certainly meeting the people and figuring out how all the dots are connected, not only actually trade, but then how international relations and what happens at the negotiating table with our equivalent of the State Department. And off the top of my head, I don't know the equivalent of the UK State Department, but other diplomatic channels, affects world trade, affects energy needs. It all comes into play, and it's really fascinating.
Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, all of it.
It does make you a little bit of an interesting when you're there at a house party, like you said. That's what you want to talk about. People are like,
Yeah, Yeah, my best friend had a party, and I was talking to one of her friends, and apparently this girl had said to my friend, "Oh, Holly's really interesting. She's got a really interesting job," and my friend was devastated. She's so jealous. Someone thought I was interesting.
Yeah, right. This is the boring ports lady. No, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You got to be a little bit careful. So sometimes people, I know I do have to be a little bit careful because I can go on. I can talk all day about shipping. It's just such an ingrained part of what I've become. And when you started this, coming in for a position after somebody left after a couple of days, your journey from then until now, has it been different? Has it been the same? Did you even have a preconceived notion of what that should be like?
That's a good question. Yes and no. I think as soon as I realized that I wanted to stay, as it were, and that I wanted to be a maritime journalist and carve out a career in this particular field, I sort of knew that the only way to go was to become a big fish in a small pond, let's say. Not that I, think I am right now, but that's the ambition. And so, in other words, like I knew if I wanted to do this long term, then I may as well try and get to the top. The mission became, and still very much is, how do I become the best shipping journalist in the world? So one thing was to come and work for Tradewinds, which I'm doing. Very glad to be doing that. But I'm still trying to figure out how to do that. Having said that, it has been a wild ride. I was freelance for a couple of years, and that was horrible. And it hasn't been easy. And I have had some periods of ill health along the way that I think at that time probably stunted my professional growth a bit. So I'll always wonder what I could have achieved if I'd been fit and healthy for all of it. Whatever, no regrets. I'm happy, I'm healthy, working my dream job now. So, and I've always had to be the very best. Yeah, that's the thing about me. It's very all or nothing. I have to be the best, I have to be the worst. If I'm mediocre, then that drives me mental. I have to do something about that.
So we're talking to hopefully the best Tradewinds reporter ever. So that's pretty fantastic.
You're not at the moment, but
No,
in
I
10
said
years time you might
hopefully
be.
in the future. That's the but
Yeah.
that's really interesting. And I just touching upon kind of having a setback, no matter if it's your health or I've had some
Yeah.
similar type of things, not necessarily setbacks with health, but for me personally. But I know of other people who've had that, as well as just you expect your career to kind of go one way, roadblocks or changes happen, and you're like, okay, how do I reset? And that's like the really nice thing about this industry is if you maintain, and we talked a little bit before we got going, if you maintain your contacts and you maintain not even friendships, but contacts and network, this industry can work for you if you have a setback, like what you described, a health setback, or, I had other non-health related setbacks where, companies got sold or downsized or whatever, and you just kind of pick yourself back up. And that's one of the really cool things about this industry that I find.
Sure. I think something that drives me mental is, when you go to a networking event and you meet someone new, and they quickly realize that you can't do anything for them. And then they're like, okay, right, gotta go and talk to this guy over here. I think that is okay in the interest of time, an event, fine, but you cannot. I strongly believe that your professional network around you can't be purely comprised of people who can just do things for you. You also need, I think of it as the B team, but that would imply that they're kind of second best, and it's not. You also need a network of people who are your tribe, who really get you and who are supportive no matter what. And they may never be able to bring you new business, or in my case, give you a story, but they'll always be there to pick you up if you're down or take you for a drink. You'll always have a laugh with them. You can, meet up on weekends and just, chill out and be yourselves. And that's one of the great things in those industries, that those people are there. There's so many characters, so many people to get on with. I think anyone who is just out to build a professional network is just about what people can do for you is really missing a trick, because there's so many awesome people out there. They're worth getting
There
to
are, and even if you want to take that approach of, oh, they can't help me, but you got to look at like somebody who, oh, maybe I'm not in the direct industry, but maybe we could do business one. You could even take it one step
know.
further. And yeah, there is the aspect, social aspect, and that's true. But I feel there's almost no wasted connection, right? And I
Yes,
think that
yeah.
if you could put somebody together, even if not to your own benefit, if you come off as a good person, as a caring person, then that kind of, if you believe in kind of that karma circle, it's going to come back to you. It may not directly, right? But if you try to help people and can take time for them, and if mentor them or
Hmm.
whatever, or even just kind of listen to their story, I think it helps out. And I think a little bit this gets into a little bit of the digital side of things, and that is, you use social media a lot. That's how we became acquainted. We've never met in
Hmm.
person, but we've become acquainted. I've commented positive on your stories. I like to say positively. I don't negative. I've always found your stories to be good. That, and of course the fact that you turned me on to that guy with the airplanes that one day, like in March, when he was trying to land airplanes, which was the coolest
Yeah.
thing. Not
Big Jet
landing air,
TV.
big jet TV. Yeah, that was really cool watching those, big jets. You look at the big boy trying to land. So we became acquainted that way. Does this kind of social media, using this, how does this help in your writing, or is this more of a distraction with people pinging you about, big jet TV?
Well, I mean, as with all the best things in life, I mean, too much of it can be a distraction. But and of course, there are days where I do wish I could just delete it and move on with my life. But I think for the most part, social media has definitely brought more positives into my life than it has negatives. And so, and it's just because it's proven itself to be so useful in so many different ways. So when I first started in this industry, I was 20. I think I just turned 22, or maybe I was, yeah, 22. I would walk into a networking event, whatever, and I would be not only the only female there, but the only person who was noticeably, call it, young. I found it really hard to, and also because I didn't have, as I've described, I didn't have anyone above me. I was the head of that publication. I didn't have anyone out with me to introduce me to others. So I was going into this industry completely cold. So, but one of the, probably this, a very clever thing that I did at that first magazine was establish their social media channels. And that kind of got the ball rolling for me in terms of networking, because it opened a door for me online that I could then go and follow up in real life. So when I walked into a room, I already knew who I was looking for, and I could introduce myself without going in completely cold, as it were. People already had a sense of who I was and what I was about, because they'd seen it on social media. To this day, I still kind of use it in that way as well, of trying to represent myself, what I'm about, what I really care about, and trying to put my stories under people's noses, but also using it as a tool so I can, yeah, give people an idea of me before I meet them. It's good for lead generation as well. I can get ideas for new stories or maybe source information. And overall, I think it's just a good starting point for things. It's a good starting point for meeting people, a good starting point for getting new ideas. The job is always to follow it up in the old-fashioned way and try and build on that in real life or with more information or whatever. Yeah, that's basically it, really. It's not a distraction. I think one of the negatives is that your attention span becomes very short. The flip side of that is that it creates kind of a flow of information that you wouldn't otherwise come across, and so it helps you to break out of maybe of your regular pattern of thinking, and just puts new stuff in front of your nose, which is really useful sometimes.
You in front of new people, or maybe even
Mm-hmm.
new stories that you would never even get into, whether it's technology or even like, you follow a lot on the court side. Maybe that takes you down a
Yeah,
different road that you've
yeah,
never thought of
totally.
before.
And then the other thing that I was was kind of thinking about this earlier, was so Tradewinds thinks of itself as the local paper for an international industry. That means that I have to try and talk to as many people around the world as possible. And, I can't think how I would have done that for social media or done it as easily. Nowadays, it's so easy to reach out to someone, and sometimes you drop someone a message and you don't expect them to give you the time of day, and pleasantly surprised to find that they do, and maybe they become a new source or a new contact or something. So yeah, it's kind of just it just saves, for me, it just saves a lot of time and effort in the initial stages of trying to initiate some kind of new relationship with someone. Everyone, you should do it. It's very useful. Every journalist should be into it.
Certainly with international business is, you can drop a line for somebody. You sit in the UK and it's dinner time in Singapore, like, oh, I have to call them on their time. No, you could just drop them an email. And especially it goes back to the whole idea of you have that connection already in the beginning, which is really very cool. If you have that connection and then you can build on that connection, and then the people feel comfortable emailing you or at least setting up a time, which didn't happen. One of the things that you wrote about in Tradewinds recently was obviously during the IMO's first Women's in Maritime Day, which was May 18th. We're recording this not too long after that, which was fantastic. And you write a lot about women in maritime. And can you talk a little bit about what you've come across and some of the improvements and some of the things that in maritime that we could do better, and some of the feedback that you got when you wrote this article?
As for what we can do better, so the women I spoke to, and I emailed a lot more women than I got responses from in this article, just provided a flavor of some of the feedback that we've got. But I think there's still a big need for mentorship. Women also raised concerns about being a mother and how that affects your career, and the support you get, making sure that you are supported and get the proper, for example, parental leave or parental benefits. Others touched on sexual harassment. There's a real range of things that we want to see. Having said all that, as good as these, Women in Maritime Day and the last day of the Seafair was, I think was themed around women as well. I think they are really good for elevating the cause and elevating women who are doing a good job. However, I think we should be careful, because I think we don't want to tell a falsely positive story. There's still so much more work to be done, particularly with respect to sexual harassment and issues like that. And in fact, speaking of getting tips through social media, as soon as that, or shortly after that, the article I did last week came out, I did get a tip from a woman via social media who said that I've got an idea for you. The next time you write on this topic, you should cover all the women who have left the industry but are bound by NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, to not talk about what they went through. And I thought, yeah, that would be something.
Wow,
yeah,
that would be
yeah,
some article, and yeah, you would probably spend a lot of time on the phone, and the documentaries about getting people to go on the record after that happened, or even on background, are remotely true. That is a very large amount of work.
There's so much more to be done. I mean, another thing that we've come across at Tradewinds is there are high profile women, let's say, in countries like, for example, Greece, who don't like having their photo in Tradewinds or don't want it because their fear is that it will encourage stalkers, which I can definitely understand. And I think that for all the positive messaging about women in shipping, I think the reality of the matter is that personal safety is still a very real concern for women in this industry, whether you're the head of a NASDAQ listed company or working in an office job or at sea. And sadly, those concerns are still present on social media. And actually, that's something I've experienced as well. So the reason that I don't post selfies online, not that I take selfies in real life anyway, because I'm not that sad, but yeah, there's also don't post selfies online ever, and why I don't want to have my picture taken at events, and why actually there aren't that many photos of me online at all. And it's because I also don't want that kind of attention. The focus has to be on my written words, I think, for me. I've also last year had a bit of a creepy experience on social media. I think that's one of the negatives for women on social media, is being, let's call it, accessible on social media always also opens you up as a woman to receiving the wrong kind of attention. I think you'd be pretty hard pressed to find any woman who hasn't had some kind of weird message from a random guy. But yeah, so last year I just had a man add me on LinkedIn. He seemed to work in the same field as me, but in a different country. He added me on LinkedIn, then he added me on my Twitter, which isn't unusual at all. No problem so far. Then
And your Twitter feed is fantastic. And I'm going to include that in the notes at the end, if that's okay. I'll include your Twitter handle, because I do know you made a note on LinkedIn to say, please follow me on Twitter. I'm much cooler there. Something to that effect. And I thought that was pretty funny. So
yeah, well, I think it's true. But yeah, so this guy, he added me on my professional accounts. Then he proceeded to dig out all of my very private social media accounts, which was weird because I was surprised that he could find them. And he added me on there as well, which is a bit freaky. But as all this was going on, he was just inundating me with messages, some of which started out being just very funny, normal, informal. I didn't think anything of it, but it became more and more constant until it was round the clock. And then he would be sort of normal, and then it would just switch, and he would talk about having no friends, no one likes him, he's isolated. And anyway, this went on for about a week, and eventually my boyfriend persuaded me to submit a police report just in case. Not being dramatic about it, but it was kind of at least if we get it down on paper, then if anything ever happens, then there's our record. And I'm home alone a lot, you see, and we couldn't really be sure that this guy really was in another country. Yeah, that's what we did. And thankfully, the only experience like that I've had, but it was something that really gave me kind of pause for thought and time to rethink about how I handle myself online and the information that I give away and my concerns about my privacy. I'm a very open person usually, and I like to, be open with people and talk about stuff, but that experience just made me really second guess that and think about how much I'm giving away. So,
and it's certainly something that women have to deal with more than men. It's very obvious. And it's also
I think so, yeah.
And it's also something that in this business, we go back to, we talked a little bit before we started chatting. This business is very small, and it's almost, I feel there should be absolutely less than no place for this, given how small the business is, right? I mean, it should be, we're kind of all in this together, in this business, that we all kind of have this brilliant passion for. And I believe that truly. I think if you're in this industry, especially if you stayed in it for a while, you develop this passion, like we talked about being at a cocktail party and just being able to, a friend of mine says, you can talk to a lampshade about shipping. I said, yeah, pretty much. That's it. And to have this sort of stuff happening. And I would like to think, though, that by using social media platforms and saying that this is happening in our industry, that people will have less of a tolerance. And I hope that makes it an improvement, not only for the people who are in the industry, but for people, especially young people, who are looking to get into it as well.
Let me explain it like this. I think that women, let me just tell you straight. Women talk about who are the creeps in this industry, and they name names. And the reason they do it is to warn each other. Don't get into a taxi with this guy alone, or don't let him walk you home, or whatever. And it may seem unfair because they may be, for example, handing on a story that they've heard from someone else about someone. However, I think it's done in the spirit of better safe than sorry. And, you know, I'm just being real with you. There are men out there who after a drink or otherwise, I either make women feel uncomfortable or have actually perpetrated acts on women, and people just don't talk about it. And you know, there are plenty of people who still have jobs. It's kind of common knowledge that they are creeps. So yeah, I think, but then the problem with that is that even if you were a woman trying to warn other women not to be in a room alone with someone, by passing on that, call it a warning, you're not doing anything about the problem, you're just passing it around. So I really hope, with everything that we've seen over the past year about sexual harassment in shipping and trying to force organizations to take more action, I really hope that we start to see some change. I don't think shipping will ever have a #MeToo movement, but I really hope that it starts to be taken more seriously, and that kind of behavior will either die out or be forced out.
You know, as you're talking about this, a little bit on the podcast about ESG, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm not changing topics here. Just bear with me a second. ESG, we always focus on the E, right? We always focus on the E.
Correct.
Focus on emissions and scrubbers and ammonia. And, you know, one of my podcasts, I had on a guy from Fuel Trust. We talk, you know, blockchain and all this great stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But what we don't talk about, one of my guests did talk about it a little bit. We talk about the S and the G. And that's where what you're talking about is over time. This is where it's going to be tolerated less and less and less. And eventually what it comes down to is, as companies are lending money or having to make these reports on you know, any of the exchanges, the S and G part will be, you know, have a lot of weight. And that's going to cause people to give pause if they're not doing the right thing to invest or to raise, to give money for capital. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I agree with you, but I think as it gets closer, frankly, as it gets closer to the income, to the money side of things, that's when it's going to start to really be implemented. I think it's, you know, is there something else that could be done? I'm sure of it. But what I think is, and I think it's happening, is as it becomes more and more of a, you know, of something that gets judged upon to borrow money against or to raise capital. If there's a problem there, it's either going to be rooted out quickly, or if it lingers, then maybe companies don't want to, you know, are less investable. Yeah, that's kind of how I see it. Maybe I'm altruistic, but maybe that's the way it happens.
I think, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think the missing link, particularly with things related to, for example, sexual harassment, is how do people find out about that? You know, what we have been seeing over the past few years, and I expect this to continue, is whenever someone has been wronged, oh no, hang on, rephrase that. In certain instances where someone's been wronged and they haven't been able to get the redress, for example, through the court system, or maybe they've lost money or whatever, anonymous websites have been set up, basically providing big data dump of documents or whatever, or just basically a smear campaign. And there's Instagram accounts as well to the same effect in this industry. I think that will continue. So that's a reputational risk there. In other instances, what we've also seen, people have tried to blow the whistle, but haven't had any success going through official channels. So they've come to the press as almost like a last resort, which is sad for us, but great for the stories, and getting and being able to tell those stories. That's where the true risk of anyone who is, call it, doing wrong comes about, and how that will as you describe, maybe have knock-on effects on whether people choose to invest in that company or whether people avoid it in terms of deals or whatever. So, yeah,
or maybe what it causes is somebody to take a minute and to dig deeper, and maybe not even in that instance, but over time, if investment partners are serious about how they invest, and you're seeing this kind of on the green side, the E part of ESG, right? If you see that and you go, okay, they're digging into their emission statements, and are they really doing something? And will the same thing happen with the S and the G part, where this falls in society governance? Okay, it's probably more the S and the G, but wherever it falls into, certainly I think that's maybe where it can end up.
Sure.
But let's see.
It's becoming, in a certain way, harder to cover things up when there are people who, will, for example, make an anonymous website detailing all of your misdeeds. People with these new digital tools, for example, social media included, people need to be aware of that as well.
Yeah, it's certainly it's not an easy thing for any person, especially a woman. In this case, that's what we're talking about. To come out and to say these things, there needs a lot of work to be done in that way. But hopefully, as the industry gets younger, which hopefully naturally it will, because people will find this a good place to be, and there will be a lot of mentors and allies to make people more comfortable. I think it's very important. As that happens and moves on, then maybe this stuff just starts to become a thing of the past. Not to say that we ignore it, but as people move on, maybe that's how it improves.
Hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully, yeah. But I think there needs to be other tools, and certainly the digital tools, what we talked about a little bit here. On to a much, maybe a different topic, but as we start to wrap up, because I think that was an important conversation. I'm going to put you on the spot here. A question for you. Are you reading anything, or if I'm talking to a journalist, are you writing anything? Are you writing anything? A book, a manuscript, a tell-all, or anything about the industry?
Well, I the reason I studied English literature at university is because I wanted to be a novelist. But then, of course, I started university in 2005, and at that time, you could be anything you wanted because we hadn't had a recession yet, and down the boom years. And I've always wanted to write my own book. I've written a book for someone else, but never for myself. And I do have an idea. Now I'm just kind of noodling.
Okay. All right. So maybe something. Yeah. Maybe I got the scoop. Your big novel in a couple of years.
Yeah. Oh, I'd love that. Oh my God, I'd get off on that. Yeah. Oh, Holly Birkett's published by Penguin or something. Oh my God.
Yeah. I can only hope. I can only hope for you on that, Holly.
But in terms of reading, do you know what? I haven't really been reading it lately. I think I've just felt so emotionally drained, especially I think, being a reporter and having to report on stuff related to Ukraine, or having industry contacts that have been personally affected by the conflict, and that there has been an element of taking work home with me in the evening sometimes. So I kind of when I'm a bit, and I tend to get into these funks where I don't want to read anything. I don't want to watch any good films. I don't want to watch any good music. I just want to listen to bloody Gangnam Style 20 times in a row, and I watch The Office on repeat because I just want to be, comforted. So no, I've had one of those periods where I just have taken very great pleasure in being a dumbass. But having said that, I just bought The Rat Line by Philippe Sands, an investigative biography of a Nazi war criminal who went on the run after the war. It's supposed to be really good. So I'm going to start reading that and just get out of this fun. Because usually I'm all about watching good films and reading good books and whatever, finding good music, but not at the moment.
Look, like you said, sometimes you go into those funks. I'll go into some things where I read a bunch, and then it just kind of Oh, look, yeah. Well, for me, it's not The Office; it's Seinfeld. Oh, look, Seinfeld's on. Oh, how many times can I watch that episode? Yeah. But that's all right though. That's yeah. I did read a book called Out on the Wire. It's actually about written by some journalists from NPR and talking about storytelling in journalism.
Oh my gosh, this is right up my street. Okay,
yeah. Well, it's when I started to do this podcast stuff about like looking at like how to pull out a little bit of a story, and doing the editing, and they'll talk about radio. It's all about radio, but it can be used for podcasting. It can be used for writing, and it's done like as an adult comic, so not that type of adult comic, but it's a pictorial. It's not written. It actually has pictures. Yeah, it's really very. I think you would like it. I'm about Out on the Wire. Out on the Wire.
Okay, I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah, the author is Jessica Abel, Abel, and it's pictorial. All right, it's like a what do they call that? A graphic novel. Graphic novel. Yeah. So not adult novel. One of
Pardon?
So no, it's a graphic novel, and it's excellent because she has the pictures in there, and it's just the way that like kind of they say, oh, this is how the idea came across, and they go through. Very good. It was one of the books that I've been reading on and off as I've been doing this journey of trying to podcast. So
okay, sold. Right, I'm gonna read that. I'm gonna read that after I've read my Naxi book.
Yeah, but and you can read it. You can bring it when you go to Positoni. You could bring it.
Yeah, you can sign it for me.
No, that's okay. Anyway, so that wraps up. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I've had an absolute ball. Thank you. It's been so nice talking to you.
That was Holly Birkett talking about how she got into shipping after growing up on a farm and sharing her take on social media tools in today's modern maritime industry. I hope that you found the podcast informative and subscribe to it on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, and most other places you get your podcasts. The pod is now also on YouTube. I have my very own channel, The Last Dinosaur. Thanks again. I'm your host, Chris Aversano, wishing you fair winds and following seas.